next guest is Kevin Noonan. He is a partner with the law firm McDonnell, Bohn, Holbert and Berghoff, and he also serves as chair of the firm's biotechnology and pharmaceuticals practice group. And he's also the co-founder of the Patents Doc blog, which is definitely worth a read.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Nice to be here.
And just before we start, can everyone hear? Because there's a lot of background noise going on. Okay, we're just going to move.
You promised no feedback. Good.
No feedback, but
okay.
Yeah. So look, Kevin, I've worked with you for a long time, harassing you about the latest biosimilar developments in the US from a sort of legal and legislative liturgy standpoint. I mean, to what extent has litigation restricted the approval and the launch of biosimilars in the US?
As it's turned out, not at all. I mean, the interesting thing is that Congress intentionally didn't set up a litigation schedule the way they did with the Hatch-Waxman Act for small molecule drugs, which they did in 1984. It was almost like they said, okay, we've done it that way, but biosimilars have their own properties that we don't think that's going to work so well. So what we'll do is we'll try to co-opt the parties, and we'll try to get the parties to have to negotiate initially to figure out what patents they're going to argue about. And the reason partly for this is that biosimilars have a much longer time of exclusivity than common and small molecule drugs. A small molecule drug has 5 years of exclusivity, and after that, generic drugs can go on the market, except for patents. If there's a patent position, obviously that can stop them. But the FDA is perfectly happy for them to get on the market after 5 years. For biosimilar drugs, it's 12 years. And so from the time when you can file your biosimilar application, which is 4 years after approval, to the time you can actually get on the market is 12 years. That's 8 years time. Congress thought, well, in those 8 years, we can have litigation between the parties to determine whether or not, or at least the first wave of patents that can be used to prevent the drugs coming on the market at the 12-year mark. And frankly, that, insofar as it's happened, I don't think it's happened in any way the way Congress thought it would happen, at all.
So you're saying it's actually working a lot more effective than with small molecule generics?
Well, it's funny because in terms of the litigation piece, there's been a few cases where there's been litigation over it, but if you look at what has happened in the courts, the way that Congress set out for this litigation to happen hasn't happened. It's very complicated, and it's been called colloquially the patent dance, where one side presents the patents they think that will be infringed, and the other side presents why they don't, and they negotiate till they get down to at least one, but maybe several patents to litigate, and that's been forestalled by a very clever legal technique that Sandoz, which was the first one to do it, said, well, we won't do any of that, and you can sue us, and Amgen did. And as it went all the way to the Supreme Court, the answer was, yeah, they don't have to do any of the things Congress said that we're going to do. Nobody has to do. So, as you might imagine, nobody's really doing them.
But I mean, there have been some very high-level, high-profile lawsuits. You mentioned Sandoz versus Amgen. Right. I mean, we've had Samsung Bioepis versus J&J with infliximab.
Right.
What have these actually achieved? Because they've kind of been settled now, haven't they?
Well, yeah, probably not what Congress thought they would achieve. And part of that has to do with the sort of very interesting nature we're in right now. Most of the drugs, if not all of them, that are biosimilar applications have been filed for are drugs that have been on the market for a very long time. And there are also drugs that have been on the market in Europe for a very long time. So a lot of the things that Congress probably thought they needed to do, as it turns out, they really haven't. The drugs have gotten approved much more quickly. I think Sandoz drug took 10 months to get approved. And most of that was because FDA made the decision that you'd be able to use the European data, clinical data and testing data. They would accept that data. And so because of that, very quick to market. And because Sandoz decided not to do the patent dance, essentially the litigation was at the Supreme Court said, at the state level, what really has to happen is that Congress has to fix the law if they want things to work differently than they have worked out.
Let's talk about Humira, AbbVie's best-selling drug. I think it pulled in over $18 billion for AbbVie last year. Mm-hmm. But also last year, we saw the Amgen versus AbbVie lawsuit settled.
Right.
That's kind of stopped Amgen launching their biosimilar until I think 2023. How big a deal was that lawsuit?
So you get, obviously it could have potentially been a very big deal, and you get a very similar thing that's happened in other contexts where you have an innovator that's put a lot of money into their drug, developing their drug and developing the market, and it gets challenged by a generic of any kind. This is a biosimilar, but it's still a generic drug. And there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of money to be lost. And so you have a question of whether, are you going to take a lawsuit where if you lose as the biosimilar, you're off the market till the patents expire, which is much longer than 2023, or if you're the innovator, are you going to be willing to trade some of that exclusivity for the certainty of knowing here's when the biosimilar is going to come on the market, and then make the business case on how you deal with that and deal with potentially the loss of lots of money. This is a big deal only because the drug is such a big drug. If it was 1.8 billion or 180 million, it's not 18 billion. It's such a big number that's what makes it a big case.
And I guess, well, because it's such a big drug, because it's such a big number, there's so many developers also looking to challenge AbbVie. So does